think, yeah, the things to know that are most important to know about me are I love my son, I love my community, and I'm all about equity. All right, so let's begin. All right, so I'm here to talk to you guys about environmental justice. And this, what you see in front of you is the definition from Cal EPA. Actually, let me back up a second and tell you a little bit more about me. So although I work for Climate Plan, I've been a community organizer for 12 years, and that's the hat that I'm gonna be, and that's the lens that I'm gonna be giving this presentation to. So this is the Cal EPA's definition of environmental justice. I won't read the whole thing, but I will say that personally, this statement is one of the most affirming pieces of statement written by a government body that I think this should replace the preamble. Like I feel like it's very affirming and reassuring. I'll just read the last sentence. The goal will be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards and equal access to the decision-making process to have a healthy environment in which to live, learn, and work. I mean, that's the goal, right? We want everyone to have equal access to the decision-making, so to the input, but also the outcomes, so that we all have a healthy environment in which to live, learn, and work. Next slide, please. And so we're all really good about talking about environmental justice. We, you know, all of these presentations have this on a panel. In the last 6 months, I've been invited to more panels than I can count to talk about environmental justice. And it's always framed in really environmental injustice. Because if we were really taking that definition seriously, what we would be talking about, we wouldn't just be talking about how there's a lack of tree canopy in Sacramento. We wouldn't be talking about just access to water, but we would talk about what actually needs to change and what systems need to change in order for us to see justice. Next slide, please. So I'm going to tell this story by telling my story, the story of me, my organizing, and my community about why it is so imperative that we have conversations about environmental justice. So this is me and two of my friends in middle school, 7th grade, in front of McKinley Park, the Rose Garden in McKinley Park. I am a girl from South Sac. One of the things I forgot to ask is if this is just a Sacramento specific group or California. But anyways, the South Side of Sacramento is like the South Side of every city. The downtown is like downtown of every city. You have folks disadvantaged in the South, more affluent folks in Midtown and downtown areas. So I grew up on the South Side. My middle school was downtown. So every day we had to wake up super early because one of my friend's moms worked downtown for the state, and she's how we got to school. Otherwise, we had to take 3 buses. So school started at 8 o'clock, but she started work at 7:30. Therefore, we had to be dropped off even earlier. And so every day, it was this constant reminder that in order for me and my friends to receive a good education, for my friend's mom to have a quality job, and for us to have these type of open spaces, we had to leave our community. I think this is where I get the framing and where I started to get the language for like what environmental injustice felt like. And so fast forward, I became a community organizer for my neighborhood. Part of it was just because there were so many injustices happening. And so this is a picture of my nephew and my brother. This picture is probably taken in about 2010. And they're talking to Ginger Rutland, who used to be an editor at the Sacramento Bee. And what they're talking to Ginger about is a natural gas company wanted to come and pump natural gas under my neighborhood. It's a pretty famous Sacramento natural gas battle that happened in Sacramento. That was my community, my neighborhood. So for 5 years, my neighborhood advocated to not have this gas pumped under us. We held public meetings. We rented buses and drove down to the Public Utilities Commission in San Francisco and gave testimony. We held signs out on the street corner. We talked at city council meetings, at SMUD hearings. We did this, funded most of this on ourselves. And for 5 years did this battle. Next slide, please. This is us waiting to testify. The man in the red shirt, red striped shirt with the glasses staring at us is my father. He's a firecracker. Next slide, please. And this is us the last time we testified when they told us that we won. The Public Utilities Commission, this is taken right outside the Public Utilities Commission, where we were told that they weren't gonna approve the contract and we weren't gonna have natural gas pumped under our neighborhood. So that is a beautiful moment, right? And we are extremely exciting. But one thing that is almost ever prevalent in the Black community is that Black joy is always fleeting. So while we're super excited about this win, we're still going to a neighborhood that at this point had no bus service. At this point, the median income is $30,000 a year, but at least we don't have natural gas, right? And so while we had this win, we had a little bit of momentum, and we pretty much come home from San Francisco and go right into our next fight, which is fighting to get bus service restored to our community. In the recession, bus service was taken away, and we were told that we would get it back in a few years. After a few years, it was clear that our bus wasn't going to be restored. And so here I am testifying at the RT meeting in public comments, advocating for a bus to be brought back. Next slide, please. So once again, right, we're organizing. We bring 200 people to a gym in our community center, and we say walk a mile in our shoes. The closest bus stop is over a mile away, across Elder Creek Boulevard, which is a 5-lane street with 40 miles. I mean, people are rushing down the street. There's no tree canopy and the sidewalks are horrible. And so we bring 200 people out. We had elected officials, we had labor leaders out, we had community folks, we had a strong showing from disability rights groups. And we had people from that community center literally walk to the nearest bus stop a mile away so they could walk a mile in our shoes. After 3 years of working with RT combing through their budgets, we were successful to get our bus restored. Next slide, please. This is a picture of a few of us standing outside of Chando's Tacos, which is a delicious taco spot here in South Sacramento. We have a location and the bus drives right past it. So we got on the bus and the bus came and picked us up on its very first route. And we all went to Chando's Tacos and celebrated, which is beautiful, right? So we've won gas battles, we've got bus service restored. And all while this is happening, marijuana was approved. And so you have folks, and the marijuana was approved, and the city was starting to approve a number of marijuana grow facilities in my neighborhood on one side of the street. So on one side of the street, you have folks who can pay $30,000 to pay for marijuana licensing. But on the other side of the street, on my side of the street where folks live, you have a community that's now going to be over-policed and criminalized for growing marijuana. So we have more policing that's happening in the neighborhood. We have a ton of money being made in the neighborhood, resources being pillaged from the neighborhood, but we're also not receiving any compensation. Next slide, please. So we're sick of it. In this picture, to the right of the picture is the George Sims Community Center, and that's where we have like our neighborhood meetings. And so a bunch of us are sitting there and we're just tired. We are tired of things being reactive. We're tired of having to fight against systems that are dictating to us the terms of our community. And we were looking for something that could be a little bit more proactive about. And so we're looking out and we see Morrison Creek. And we said, what if we just do a cleanup? And so we send an email out to a bunch of folks and say, hey, go back for me. We're not ready for that one yet. So we do a cleanup and we say, hey, there's a lock on the gate. There's no access to get in. We'd love to do this cleanup. I mean, the community center, if you look right in the dead center of that picture, those little buildings in the back far off are a school. And to the left side of the picture is a vacant lot. So we're thinking, there's this vacant lot, we can clean up, we can do it for the school, we can partner with the school. This would be a great community event. So we send a bunch of emails out. And some folks that may be on the call, some folks that you guys all are pretty familiar with, they showed up. They said, can we come on and look at your creek? And next slide. and we were able to get a little bit of funding. So the guys who came out, we had Stefan and Mark, oh gosh, I don't remember their last names, Stefan and Mark at DWR, Chris Bowles from CBEC, they all came out, and for me, it was one of the most interesting meetings I've ever been a part of, because I asked them for pickers and bags. I was like, we literally are looking for like someone to donate pickers and bags for cleanup and open the gates. And they start pulling out tape measures, measuring easements. They start looking to see like if there's what type of like wildlife and vegetation is happening around. And me and my counterpart Zong, we were just like, what are they doing? Like, why does this matter for pickers and bags? And I credit Stefan with saying this, but it could have been someone else. They said, we have funding to do this. Ask me for a Porsche. If you ask me for a Porsche, I probably can't get you a Porsche, but I can at least get you a Toyota. And that is the worst thing you can tell an organizer. That's the worst thing you can tell me, because now I'm asking for like rocket ships to be placed along vacant lots. But with that, we had some energy around this idea. What does a creek revitalization look like? Like, what are we even talking about here? Because for us, this was a place that had been blocked off. We had absolutely no access to. And now not only are we told that we might be able to have access to it, but we could build whatever we want. It was huge. So we started fundraising, and we were able to get some money to do a few of the cleanups, as you see here. Next slide, please. We were able to take 40 people on a creek tour. So this is actually another view of our creek. The fence that you see is actually the fence that we were just looking through in the first picture. Right now, we have folks that are living under the bridge right here. And I also want to be really intentional here and say that in part of our project, what I think we're very clear about is this can't just be about revitalizing a creek. It has to be a conversation about systems, because what I would hate to see is folks in my neighborhood have a wonderful creek to live on, but folks who are unhoused that are using this creek as a resource are displaced even further, because they're a part of our community too. We also want to see, we understand that gentrification is happening all throughout Sacramento. The last thing, and I said this very passionately to a lot of folks, if you build this creek and my neighborhood gets gentrified, I guarantee you I will be the one who leads in burning this creek down. I may have been the one who was leading building it, but I will lead in burning it down, because we have to make sure that we're protecting assets for folks who put in the hard work to get them into communities and have them developed. And so we figure out, how do we make sure that housing prices stay affordable for folks who are living here? How do we make sure that unhoused population still has a place to live? How do we make sure that this is something that's accessible for the schools that live, for the schools, like you saw in the first picture, right? There's the elementary school, there's the community center, a little down the road is a middle school. All of them can have access to this natural, or as you can see, it's a cemented channelized creek, but still this resource in the back of our community. Next slide, please. So we were able to take about 40 students down. This is Puda Creek. We did a creek tour, because one of the things that I think is the most disheartening about organizing in disadvantaged communities is just how, after years of broken promises, how demoralizing it can be. And so when we were talking about buy us a Porsche, well, what does a Porsche even look like? Let's see what other communities have. So we did a tour of Puda Creek. We also went to Arcade Creek. And next slide, please. There we go. We have a nice picture of Chris Bowles. We also have Stefan. There's Alta. If you guys know, she's with the Sacramento Creek Council. Alta's really the one who sent the email out to everybody and connected the right folks. But we had folks that came in and volunteered and have donated a ton of time and resources to seeing this project through. In December, January, we were awarded the Urban Streams Restoration Grant. So we got $700,000 to do planning. Now, mind you, I come from South Sac. $700,000 to me seems like you do way more than a plan, but that's what I'm being told. It's only going to get us a plan. And so there we go. $700,000, but then COVID hit, and so we haven't been able to really start doing a lot of the community development points. Do you mind if you take the slides down for a second? So I think for me, I get really passionate when we talk about environmental injustice, right? Because those are all the injustices that I just listed out. But I want to talk about what environmental justice looks like for my community. We have conversations, I sit in conversations all the time where they talk about like communities aren't engaged, communities aren't active. No, communities are tired. Over the last 12 years, I've had to be a civil engineer, transportation planner, environmental planner, you know, urban planner, all of these things. I've had to become expertise just because systems are not paying attention and being intentional about my community. And yet we are always carrying the burden of decisions being made and how they impact us. And it becomes frustrating over time, upsetting over time, that every couple of years, after every win, we have to start looking at, okay, now what's the next thing that's broken that we have to fix? And so, and I'm one of the people who say all the time, we need more community engagement, which we absolutely do. But what we also need more is a standard for everyone. I want to have the same access to fresh water as any of my counterparts in Sacramento. I want to have access to those open spaces. And I think as long as we continue to just talk about the injustices, we're never actually going to get to where we need to be. In my climate plan job, one of the things we're talking about right now is the California Transportation Plan 2050 just came out, and they said that even if they do everything right, we're not going to reach our climate goals. The number one reason is because we're not having serious conversations about equity. And we keep dancing around racial justice. We keep dancing around environmental justice, when really, the more we dance around it, we're not going to solve it. And that is going to be the root cause. That is going to be the root cause of us not reaching our climate goals. In my neighborhood, we're tired. You know, we don't want to have to look for the next fight. I don't want to have to look for the next fight. We want to enjoy Tuesday nights and watch TV and kick our feet up. We don't want to have to go to city council meetings and, you know, wait on calls all day on city council meetings, or stand in line when we can just to have public comments heard, where we have 2 minutes to say, hey, I'm a human, acknowledge me. Hey, I'm a human, I don't want natural gas under me. Hey, I'm a human, I would like bus service in my neighborhood. Hey, I'm a human, I think that if marijuana is going to be grown in my neighborhood and folks that can afford it, then have access to it, then I shouldn't be over penalized if it's still going to be grown in my neighborhood. Hey, I'm a human, I think we should have access to a creek. I would love something like the American Parkway in my backyard. We are tired. And the problem is we don't have power, quite frankly and honestly. And so we need folks in power to care. And I don't know what it takes. I really don't know what we have to say, what we have to do. I don't know if it's a time frame. I was, as sad as the state of things are, I thought that COVID would do it. I thought with a pandemic, a global pandemic, where we're seeing like things are pulled back and the veil is lifted, I thought that would be enough. It's still not. We're still engaging in these conversations. I thought that when, as traumatic and horrible it is what happened to Mr. Floyd, and we had those racial uprising protests, I thought, oh, there's going to be a silver lining here, and then we can really have these conversations, and we're still not. So I think we all need to be really clear, like, what is it going to take for us to actually start having these conversations about what environmental justice actually looks like? What does racial justice actually look like? Because until then, I think we just need to let these disadvantaged communities alone, because we're tired and we don't have any power. And it is so demoralizing always trying to have these conversations. Can you pop up my last slide? I'm going to end here. I'm going to exploit my son a little bit because he is absolutely adorable. My son is a year and a half. And oh gosh, I'm getting choked up slightly. He's a year and a half, and he is energetic and fun loving. He loves to play outside, and he loves to water our garden. And I'm sorry for all the water conservation folks, we don't do a good job at it because he's just so cute. So I can't turn the water off. I'm just so sorry. But I think about, like, as every day, every month, I'm just constantly reminded, am I going to have to raise him in a world where he needs to be prepared to fight. We saw my nephew, right, at 5 years old, talking about what an explosion looks like. Do I have to prepare my son for this is how you have public meetings? This is what organizing looks like. Or can we just have the conversations now that set the world up for a better place for him? So I'm going to end there. This is my contact information, some ways to reach out to me. I would love to have more conversations about this. I love to be in community with folks. Please reach out to me. I will say though, I'm not great at answering my phone, but when I do, it's worth it. But please, please, please reach out, and I will end there. Thank you.
Nailah, thanks so much. Clearly, we have only scratched the surface of this topic in one talk, but thanks for giving us a glimpse. And